Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. Hello and welcome to the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I am your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always at the top of the show, it is my pleasure and honor to thank our sponsors for supporting this storytelling environment where we can share incredible lupus stories. And Molly McCabe is certainly one of those stories. I think a lot of our viewers probably know Molly's name. She is the founder of Molly's Fund and an incredible champion for lupus patients all over the world. And your story is really, I think, in this time of influencers and people who are really trying to share their stories, you are one of the OGs. So I appreciate you joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you and I, our histories crisscrossed back a long time ago. And I remember learning about Molly's Fund when we were sort of in the beginning of Lupus LA. It was our timelines crossed paths. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. But tell me, I know you had a very long diagnostic process in your lupus. And so tell me a little bit about your time before lupus. I know you were a really accomplished opera singer, and I'm stealing the show, but you go ahead and tell me a little bit about sort of where you were before your lupus diagnosis.
Well, I don't know about super accomplished, but I was in fact an opera singer for 9 years. I was really enjoying my career, and I had just launched my first contract in my hometown. So I was really excited about getting to share it with the people I love. And I started getting sick. I woke up one morning and I passed out on my bedroom floor because I had 104 fever. And when I got to the doctor, I had 7 different infections at one time. I took the antibiotics, thought I got better, and then 2 weeks later, they all came back again. And that was kind of the story for the next 2 years. And then fortunately, I found an amazing doctor at UCLA who took me through the head of every specialty at UCLA Medical. It took 17 doctors. The last doctor I saw was a rheumatologist.
The last one.
The last one, of course.
What year was this? What year was this?
That was in 2005 that I was diagnosed with lupus and fibromyalgia.
And you were living up north, right?
Yeah, I was in Portland, Oregon at the time. And I was just so desperate for somebody to tell me what was going on that I went to LA to find a doctor who would.
That's amazing. And it's very interesting to me that I wonder if today, the 20 years later, whether or not the rheumatologist would be first on the list or 17th still, or maybe somewhere in the middle.
That's a really good question. I'm betting somewhere in the middle, or at least I'm hoping in that amount of time we've made some changes to that.
Yeah. So you get diagnosed with lupus. Had you heard of lupus? Did you know what to expect?
I had no idea what it was. And the only thing I could think of when the doctor was like, all right, you have lupus. Here's some Plaquenil. I'll see you in a month. And I walked out the door. Like, there was this really bad B movie from the 80s called Gross Anatomy with Matthew Modine and Christine Lottie. Yeah, the old school days. And she dies of lupus in the end. And that was all I knew. And I was like freaking out. So I went to meet my sister at a Starbucks and we Googled lupus, and there were completely inconsistent definitions of what that meant. And so I spent the next month in like panic mode and Googling everything you could think of.
Yes.
Nothing really gave me answers.
And so what did you get a little bit better once? I mean, the Plaquenil takes a few months, right? So
yeah, no, it took a good year before I got the right combination of medicines going. And I definitely spent another year after that just in pure feeling sorry for myself mode, because my one organ that was consistently attacked was my lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you need those for opera singing. It
Yes.
comes in handy. So, I just really was sitting on my couch feeling sorry for myself. And finally, my mom was like, you've got to start seeing people and getting out. So she invited a group of our family and friends over for dinner. And I slowly told them what I'd been going through and what was going on right now. And that turned out to be the first board meeting of Molly's Fund.
Wow. So before that, you really hadn't shared your story at all. You were really just kind of
I wasn't
hermiting.
telling anybody. Yeah, I had to quit all my contracts and people were reaching out, would you like to come audition? And of course, under any other circumstances, I would. But no, I wasn't telling anyone.
And so when you had this dinner party, was it a conscious, we're going to have this dinner party to start this organization, or it just really naturally sort of came out of that conversation?
It just kind of came out of the conversation that this was a group of women that I had worked on throwing events for other nonprofits in town. Mm-hmm. And we had done so much to help other organizations. Why couldn't we find something to do to help one of our own? And that really was the philosophy behind Molly's Fund, was that we wanted to help the other patients out there that were going through the same thing I was.
And what did you find in terms of the landscape of other lupus organizations at the time? Had you investigated that before Molly's Fund?
Yeah, no, I had. I made an attempt and went to Advocacy Day for LFA, and it just didn't go very well. There were some scheduling things that just didn't work out, and it was very hard for me to get there. So I realized that wasn't going to work. And then we started talking about, there's nobody out there that's telling like the patient side of things, or talking about how do you find the doctor for that specialty or this one, or I don't know, anything about dealing with the day-to-day of lupus.
So you started Molly's Fund. You guys said, all right, we're going to do this ourselves. Tell me a little bit about, because when I helped start Lupus LA, Dr. Dan Wallace was the catalyst, and he obviously had the reputation and the gravitas to kind of pull together a lot of people. But you're really starting in your living room with a bunch of people who probably didn't know that much about lupus. So what was your first step? I feel like today, the people in your shoes are going to social media. They're telling their story on social media, but this was before that, right? So what was your first step?
Well, in the 2 years I'd had lupus at that point, I knew that my only outreach to the world was my computer. And I was sick every day. I was not able to get out of the house almost every day. And that computer was the one way I could connect or try to find other people like me. And so I knew when we started Molly's Fund that was the area we wanted to focus on most, was creating a website that had clear, cohesive data and that could welcome anyone who wanted to participate.
Yeah, no, I remember that site. Actually, I was super impressed because we were 5, 6 years, 7 years into Lupus LA at that point, and we were also a young and hungry organization. And I think we started out focusing on raising dollars for research, but ultimately figured out that this patient need is so great. So tell me, what was the first indication that you were onto something?
Well, it was actually about 2 years into it.
Yeah.
My mom and I had put an ad in the newspaper that we were hosting a support group meeting the first Saturday of every month. And nobody came for like 2 years. So my mom and I would go to lunch and that was it. But then someone showed up, and 3 people came, actually, 2 Native Americans and a girl named Jamie Galt, who was an amazing friend of mine eventually. And she was also a Native American. So she translated a bit for them what I was saying about the services and things they could look for when they were telling me about our case. And that was really the start. Then a friend told a friend and another friend. And we really, within the year or two after that, got an amazing cohesive group of regulars that were just there every month. And there's still some of my best friends today.
And so your own personal lupus journey at this point, what does starting Molly's Fund do for you health-wise and mentally? I think, I think that's a more important question.
Well, I realized real quick that if we were going to do this, I needed to be able to get out of the house. And so one day it just kind of came to me that I could be sick laying on my mom's couch, or I could be sick out living my life. And that epiphany has held me through all the years since then. That every time I start to have a bad day or feel down, I just remind myself, it's there no matter what. You can't change it. So what you can change is your approach to it and how you feel about it.
And did that start resonating even more when you saw other people coming to these support groups and really benefiting from Molly's Fund?
Oh, yeah. No, I had no idea how different this disease looked like for every other person. There was nobody in our support group that had the same story. Everybody had different needs. But the great thing about that group was somebody knew a doctor who did this, or someone had talked to someone who knew about that. So even though you were having a completely different experience than the person next to you, we all worked together to make sure we were all taken care of. And that was really what started bonding us as an organization, was to creating those bonds, not only in our support group, but out everywhere in the world. We started support groups all over the country. And our website really focused on virtual meetings way before they existed. There was no Zoom in those days. So we were old school, and we failed. We failed miserably on several attempts at doing it. But eventually we got it going. And social media came around, which was a really easy way to talk to other people. We learned quickly. And we also, a big part of our organization was sharing the patient's stories. That we had a page on our website where anyone who submitted their story got posted there. And 18 years later, one of my best friends, Mata, was telling me that she had never told anyone outside of her family what was going on until she submitted her story to Molly's Fund. And I had no idea.
And she was our first guest on the very first podcast of this podcast. So
she's an amazing person.
Amazing. Yeah. No, and I think I really do think you guys were at the forefront of that. I mean, now Lupus LA is also really in that business a little bit. And I think it's so important because I don't think people realize how much sharing lupus stories helps other lupus patients, but also helps researchers, doctors, people trying to raise money. Because I think lupus is such a hard disease to relate to that hearing from the patients really clarifies what the needs are for the disease, for lupus patients, for lupus research, and for the doctors, really. I think I've spoken to so many rheumatologists or lupus researchers who don't truly get the ups and downs of a lupus diagnosis. And you guys really were the leaders in trying to bridge that gap. I probably didn't even know that was going to be part of the result, but I think that's just really incredible. We're going to take a quick break and get in some important messages, and then we'll be right back, and we're going to talk more about Molly McCabe's story. We'll be right back.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need. Call 310-657-5667 or visit our website at lupusla.org to support the efforts of Lupus LA.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight, talking to Molly McCabe. And we were talking before the break about Molly's Fund and how it's really changed lives. How did it change your lupus story or your treatment, your recovery, or your path?
I think it gave me a reason to keep going. If anything else, it gave me a purpose and a reason to get out of bed each day. And each time I felt like, oh, I just can't make it today, I would remind myself of all the other people I've met and their incredible stories of how they're thriving and succeeding in this fight. And I would get up and keep going. And every bad treatment I've had or really bad downfall I've been in the hospital as much as the rest of us, but I just keep reminding myself that it does get better and that there's a reason we keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but our children and our grandchildren. Mm-hmm. The research being done today, even if it doesn't save my life, it's going to save someone's life. And totally. That's why we fight.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I think it's so, by focusing on other people's stories, I think you really gain so much in your will and your resolve and your education, really. Because what do you think education to lupus patients means? What does that lifeline mean to somebody who just got diagnosed?
That lifeline is essential, and it's so much easier these days, you guys. Google is there. There's a million lupus websites out there that will tell you what your disease is. There's a lot of Cliff Notes versions and books that tell you how to easily explain it to your friends and family. There's children books so you can explain it to your kids. All of these reasons to educate yourself are there. And research is the biggest part of that. I mean, keep up. There is clinicaltrials.org. I would go to at least once a week to see what's going on in the lupus field and see how I can help it. That's so essential. Participating in a clinical trial or taking a survey for something else. It seems easy and it only takes about 10 or 15 minutes. But it can save someone else's life, which makes it all worthwhile.
100%. So you transitioned to the board of the Lupus Research Alliance. Tell me a little bit about that transition.
Well, when we first started raising money at Molly's Fund, we had to figure out where to give it because I didn't want to give it blindly, seeing how hard it was to raise dollars for something like this. And so I had researched all the major organizations out there. And the one that appealed to me most was the Lupus Research Alliance because every dollar donated goes directly to research. There's absolutely nothing spent on overhead. And after having my own organization, and I'm sure as how you can relate, there's a lot of overhead involved. So the fact that their board covers that is incredible. And so we started donating our dollars there. And that's how I initially met with them. And then when I transitioned from Molly's Fund in 2017, they reached out and asked if I would be interested in joining their board, which I was very honored to do. And I have loved every minute of it. I have learned so much and done so many things there that I'm proud of. So I enjoy it.
And what's your major focus with them?
Well, obviously the patient is my focus and the patient's voice. When we were doing Molly's Fund, we had met with some of the people from LRA and talked about clinical trials and what the biggest hurdles are for why aren't there more completed and data shared. And what we realized is that patients were smart and we're not stupid. We deal with our bodies every day, all day. So when we're not getting the medication in the trial, we're kind of out, we don't have the extra energy for things that aren't benefiting us. So what we really needed was this program that we created called PALS, and it's Patient Advocates for Lupus Studies. And this is probably the thing I'm proudest of there, because we started from a little back meeting room, and now we have completed phase 1 and are training PALs for phase 2, and also doing trial buddies who will work with people all the way through the clinical trial and explain things to them and tell them why it's important and why they should continue. And what a PAL did is, when the days were hard and you didn't want to pay for the cab fare all the way to the university, they can get on the phone with you and explain to you that, yes, you may not be getting the medicine. You're right. 50% of us don't. It's a control group. It's essential. But here's why you need to show up. You showing up means your grandchildren someday, even your children, might get this medication. And the only reason they're going to get it is if you complete this trial. Because if they don't have enough people seeing it all the way through, then there's no way for them to complete the trial, and the medication may never come to light, which would be the biggest loss of all.
Yeah, no, that's an incredible point. Yeah, I think that's true. I think people don't realize when they participate in a clinical trial how important it is, because the numbers are pretty small. I mean, these clinical trials run on a very thin margin in terms of, the margin for error. And, it's not like there's 10,000 people trying to get into these clinical trials. They take 50, 75, 100 people at the most in some of these things. And if they don't get a complete set of data, they don't get onto that next level of study. And I think your people, and I think sometimes the trial people don't know how to connect with the patients. I don't think for them it's a very mathematical, scientific process, and trying to remember that there's a personal aspect to it, that you really have to shepherd along these personal stories, is critically important.
Well, and I think that's the difference with having a peer-to-peer relationship and having a relationship with your doctor. Most of us have great relationships with our doctors, but I'm not going to sit and talk to them about my aches and pains because they already know I have them. But on someone who is on the same level as me and has going through the same thing I'm going through, I would love to hear what they have to say about why I should continue to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an incredible program. So tell me about life these days. Tell me about your lupus. Where are you these days?
I was one of the first beneficiaries of Benlysta back in the day when it was just passed. Mm-hmm. And I am very lucky to say that I have been in remission for the last 6 years because the medication allowed me to get off the steroids that I was dependent on. And to this day, I don't have any disease activity going on, which I am knocking on wood right now. Because I am very lucky. I still have my fibromyalgia and have gotten that mystery autoimmune illness in the last year. But, just going through this whole process of getting diagnosed all over again reminds me why I do what I do.
And do you sing anymore?
To my son and for fun in the car.
Yeah. All right. That's good. It comes back, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I'm sure. And so what's next for you? What do you hope to accomplish next in your advocacy journey?
My advocacy journey is the same as it's always been. I want to amplify the patient's voice in any way possible. And whether that's encouraging people to speak up year round, or in particular, May is coming up, Lupus Awareness Month, share your story. Anybody that you share your story with, learn something new about the disease. And that's what us patients are responsible for. And that is the change we can make. I think people undervalue what that can do for a person.
For sure. Well, I really appreciate you letting us amplify your story.
Thank you so much.
And for sharing it with us today on the podcast. I know you're an inspiration to many, including me. And thanks so much for doing this.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.